Welcome to the Comic Watchers Show. I'm Chad Burdett. Matt has the night off, but joining me is my co-host for tonight, Sean, who is also part of the Comic Watch team. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you've been on the show before, but tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, I've been a part of Comic Watch, I think, since 2020 or maybe 2019. I can't remember when. It feels like a long time though. But I am a TV, film, and comic review contributor. I do mostly comics now, but I do TV and films from time to time as well. And in addition to that, I do the Caption Life podcast show, which is about comics, oddly enough. And so that's kind of like the two big things that I kind of do in relation to Comic Watch, because the Caption Life is actually part of Comic Watch as well too. So that's what I do and who I am.
And I think this is the first time we've actually talked to each other in real life.
I think so. Yeah, or at least it's been a while. If we have before,
No, I
everything's
don't think we
kind of
have.
blurs. Yeah,
But we're not here to talk about us. Let's
right.
what are we here to talk about, Sean?
Yeah. So we have we got a opportunity to talk to our guest today and to kind of set this up on what we're going to be talking about. Hex Publishers and Random Games are partnering to create original comics based on the UNIOVERSE video game and platform for user-generated creativity. A six-part series of interconnected one-shots will introduce the first five playable UNIOVERSE heroes from the UNIOVERSE video game. That's a lot to say. The comics are co-written by Colorado Book Award winner Joshua Viola and Angie Hodap. I hope I pronounced her name right.
You did.
Okay, good. With interior art by Ben Masua, who has done Cryowolf, Jupiter Jet, and cover art by AJ Nazaro, who's done Hearthstone and Overwatch. The series launched on May 9th this year with UNIOVERSE Rayu.
And joining us this evening is Josh, one of the co-writers. How are you doing, Josh?
Good. Great. Thanks for having me.
I don't know. Before we get into the books, tell us a little about a bit about yourself and your history with comics.
Yeah. So I am the owner of Hex Publishers. So I publish, write, edit a variety of, primarily in the anthology space, prose anthologies. That's sort of where Hex took off. But I also have a background in video games, primarily as an art director. Uh, and actually, the one of the first projects that I launched, I want to say back in 2012 with Leviathan Games, was actually a 3D comic book app called The Bane of Yodo, and that was like really early on when the the iPhone was in its infancy and you were playing around with the 3D space on your phone. So that was one of my first experience, working in comics. And I've published comics kind of here and there since that time frame. But when I came on board to work on the UNIOVERSE project, I was actually pulled in to work on novelization, which I did contribute to, and then a decision was made, pretty early on that we wanted to kind of present the character hero backstories through comics. So that's why
And,
we're here.
and what's your history like? Do you remember maybe the first comic book you read, or
I mean, when I think back on, I can't remember the first comic book I read, but I mean, it was like I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, so like the only access I had to comic books were on the in the grocery store on the shelves there, right? So the I mean, early on, as a kid, I mean, I was hardcore into the Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man. Um, but then today as a comic book reader, I'm much more interested in more indie and not so much like Cape Crusader superhero stuff. So I mean, like, I go more like Black Science. I love the current Earth Divers by Stephen Graham Jones. That's out. Wormwood, Chew, things of that nature. That's more like on the indie side of things. So, but yeah, I would say I started pretty similarly to, and then of course growing up, Tim Burton's Batman, and that then I was obsessed with Batman, and so on and so forth. So
yeah, it's funny on my show. We talk about like what got people into comics, and funny enough, it's always the movies or TV shows that got us started. Right? It's Batman 1989, Michael Keaton, or the Batman animated series, or X-Men animated series. Like those tend to be like the three top things that got people into comics around my age, at least. And so it's just funny to hear you say that. That's the same thing that happened with you.
My cousin I remember he had this blue like suitcase that I don't know that he stored, and he was like 10 years older than me, right? But as a kid, that was a huge age gap, and
right.
he, I didn't know anything about collectability, right? I just thought every comic you buy is going to be worth something.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what he, what he taught me. He like opened this briefcase, and it was like, just mesmerizing. Like I thought he was rich, and he did too. He was like convinced they're all going to be.
What was it? The light hitting the hollow, the hollow covers and the chromium.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, but that actually is a pretty vivid memory though, as far as like just thinking they were cool,
Yeah.
So yeah. But grocery store racks, that's where it was at for me.
Oh yeah, it's a bummer they don't do that anymore. I'm actually surprised that they don't have something at least. I mean, the times have changed and all that, but that's another thing that a lot of people have said as well too, is that they remember. Like I know for me, I remember getting Disney Afternoon from the grocery store all the time when we're checking out and everything. I got the Disney Afternoon where you get to read the backstories about your favorite shows like Darkwing Duck, or the actors, like the interview and stuff like that. But I remember they would have like Archie comics and other kinds of comics on the rack as well too. So it's kind of a unfortunate thing that they don't have that. But at the same time, I was thinking about this because someone's like, yeah, when you go to the grocery store, that's a great way to pick it up. I'm like, but I mean, how many of us like go to the grocery store anymore? Like how many of us like get it like delivered or something like that? So it's like people aren't going to the grocery stores as much as they used to when we were kids. And so I think that's something that we're going to start seeing less of people talking about they remember getting at the grocery store. Then we're going to people be like, why are they selling them at the grocery store of all places?
And when I do go, I'm like in and out, like grab my stuff and go.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
Plus, sitting on the shelves, they get all bent and handled.
Yeah.
And
right. Yeah.
Yep.
So kind of what got you into wanting to get into the publishing side and writing?
Well, I mean, writing was just always just very natural. I mean, I've been telling stories, mostly like sequels to movies from as early as like fan fiction before I knew it was fan fiction, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, like I remember in third grade, it was like a creative writing class, and we had to tell this story, and I was so excited. It was like very much Aladdin had just recently come out, so it was like very much inspired by that. And then I had like characters from other Disney shows, and I just like kind of combined them into this little story and presented it to the class. Had to read it, and I was so excited. And I remember like it was my first experience of like criticism and critique, and I was like crushed. But like my own the third graders were like, that was not very good.
This is third grade. I was thinking like this is like
no, this is
or something.
No, but that was like the first like real memory where I was like, I want to write a story. And then like through school, I mean, up into high school, I was writing just weird like fan fiction to darker, not Disney stuff at that point. But
right.
Yeah, and then I went to college for I've always been very interested in video games, but I'm very much like an old school like campaign mode, for story driven linear kind of video game narrative. So I wanted to do both art because I'm an artist as well, and write, and my thesis was actually the the concept for that for my program was turned into my first novel, and I didn't really know where to start because I knew I liked to write, but I didn't go to school for writing. And then I got a mentorship with Steve Alton, and he's the author of Meg, that big Jason Statham shark movie.
Right. Yeah.
So I got to know him, and he kind of coached me. I learned a lot. I wouldn't say necessarily have taken that advice in a lot of ways, but I did learn a lot, and that was like the first step. And then he connected me to my first agent, and then I was also breaking out into video games and trying to influence show that I could do the art and that I could do the writing. And after my first book came out, I realized like there were a lot of things I would have done differently, right? And I learned a lot through that publishing process, and I decided to start my own company and to try to do that myself. And I actually started Hex when I got the rights back to my first book. The goal was to just republish that, and that was like back in 2014 when I started Hex. And so it was just purely like to put my stuff out there. But then I completely went the opposite direction, and I really focused on anthologies. So and publishing other writers and putting together themes. So yeah, I started that's kind of where the writing background and why Hex was formed, and to like kind of make like an interesting tie into comics. The first anthology that I did was Nightmares Unhinged, this horror anthology, prose anthology. It had some illustrations in there, but it's not a comic, obviously. But that artwork was extremely popular, and then AMC licensed the cover art to use for Fear the Walking Dead season 2 for their like promo. So it was kind of cool, and that helped like promote the publishing house in that book, and things just kind of took off from there.
So let's get into the books. I mean, I know that the first issue is out, and the second one I believe is coming out next week or soon.
Yeah, June 6th is issue 2, Krisha. Yeah.
Okay, so kind of, I guess, give us kind of a background of what the overall, well, I guess video game, since it's based on a video game,
Sure.
correct?
Yeah. So just in case people aren't familiar, I'm sure it's fairly new, and we're going through that launch process right now. But UNIOVERSE is a very, very epic, large scale sci-fi property. And it's kind of the brainchild of a number of people that have a pretty interesting background in games. Tony Harmon, who was one of the early people involved with the original Grand Theft Auto, Donkey Kong Country, Crackdown, and then Wyeth Ridgway, who's was my old boss. That's how I was roped into this. He's worked on a bunch of properties for South Park licenses, in particular, like South Park, Pirates of the Caribbean. And they formed the Random Games. They started this team, and then they hired Brent Friedman, who was lead writer on a number of huge games: Call of Duty, Halo, Star Wars, the Clone Wars TV show. Anyhow, so they created the UNIOVERSE, and the idea is the main idea is that we're in this future, this where faster than light speed travel doesn't exist, but humans have discovered this ancient alien device on Mars, and what it allows you to do is transport your consciousness instantly across the cosmos into another skin, and that can be a clone of your own body, or it can be something that's generated, an alien skin, so on and so forth. And really, what the UNIOVERSE is about is exploring, different worlds and inhabiting these different bodies. But that's kind of the backstory. And then, of course, we have our main characters, or our heroes, and that's Ryu, Krisha, Torgaret, Vela, and Vela Jenks, and Anil. And so they hired me to help translate and adapt those characters into the comics, the one shots. So Ryu, the first one that's out, we tease who he is. He's this uh, uh, this legendary kind of hero, alien warrior that's been around for countless centuries. He can't even recall how long he's been around, and so he's searching for his past, and he's on this quest while he's also hunting down Krisha, who's introduced in season 2 or issue 2 for interesting reasons.
It's funny that you said season 2 because I've been on some other shows or talked to other people when we're talking about issues. They said season 2 as well. So it's almost like it's becoming interchangeable now for whatever reason.
Yeah, Netflix has like just destroyed everything.
Right. I have to say, with these one shots that you have, one of the things I thought was a really interesting storytelling perspective that you don't see in some of the other comics that we might read is that it reads a lot like the movie Vantage Point in terms of how they tell that story. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie or not.
I'm not, huh?
This was a movie I remember. This was like around the time where a lot of creatives were trying to think of different ways to tell a story by kind of separating, like disrupting the linear timeline of how you consume like the story that happens, right? And so Vantage Point is kind of like that. You know how we have like Lost and like shows like Arrow where they go back and forth and stuff like that. Vantage Point is actually takes place like during the day, and I can't remember all the concept or like what the overall concept was, but basically what they do is they look at a particular time frame during that day, and then once that scene is over, they go and look at that same time frame over again, but through the lens of some other character.
Sure.
And that's kind of what I saw in these first 2 issues, is that we're seeing a particular perspective of a character. Like, the first one was Ryu. And then when you read the second one, it's kind of happening at the same time. And then you kind of see like those 2 moments overlap from what you saw in the first issue to the second one, and kind of, converging over there. And I thought it was really cool. And I didn't know like if that was something that you've always like wanted to kind of experiment with, that sort of storytelling, or if it's something that just kind of came up like naturally or what.
Well, so that's awesome that you noticed that, because we carry that through the first 5 issues. There's a lot of it, and the first 2 issues are very similar, but 3, 4, and 5 we go into some weird places. But then there's always that little thread where it's like, oh, this happened in this issue, and this happened that same day. I've never done that before. So that was a lot of fun, and truly that was all Angie's idea. So she was the mastermind behind that, because I was like terrified, honestly, because that's like you can get like really like you can lose yourself and stuff like that, but we pulled it off. I'm pretty happy with it, especially like like I said, when you get to like issue 4 and 5, it's really cool. And then the first 5 are introducing those heroes, and then you see how they're all connected. And then issue 6, which is a triple issue, that's where it's like, oh, okay, this is why we introduced them. This is why they're all here. So
awesome. I can't wait to read that. That's cool.
Yeah, it was fun. So that's great that you picked up on that.
Yeah. And no, I mean, and you guys did a good job of kind of setting that up to make it clear that, here's kind of what's happening with Ryu. And so when you go into the second book with Krishna, is that right? Krisha, sorry. Yeah. You kind of start seeing that like from the get-go, basically, is you read that in the mind frame of, oh, that's what's kind of like what they were talking about in the first issue, and now you're actually seeing it unfold.
Right.
But what I also love is that because it's from that particular lens, you don't get all the details of the story. You just kind of get generally what they would know from the situation. And so when you read this one, you're still like, oh, I don't even know like what the result of that whole instance or that whole scene and everything. So you get to find out about that in that issue. So I think it was a really cool way of kind of doing this as a very interconnected series of one shots that we don't see in a lot of comic book stories that we get.
Yeah. Well, and the crazier thing is that because we spent so much of this stuff is seeded and planned out for it. I've never experienced that on the story team where It's like, okay, we spend about a year developing with, as a whole team, just focused on story, constant back and forth while I'm doing the comics. But on top of that, the anthology, the prose anthology. So, what I mean by that is, it's just words. There, it ties into the comics as well. So there's even more information. So when they're all really tied together, and you get a lot of some deep, fun lore. Once you get in there, if you really get into it, there's a lot to discover. So.
Yeah. Oh, I could tell. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
And so, how do these tie into the video game component of the the UNIOVERSE?
Well, basically these are the characters. Really, what we modeled this after was I don't know if you checked them out, but Overwatch did those one-shot comics based on their heroes, and that was really our template that we borrowed from. So we wanted to give kind of a greater a deeper look at who the characters are before the full game comes out, and it's not just one game, it's a series of games that are coming out. So at this stage, the game hasn't released. They've only released a playable alpha of a certain portion of it. So the equivalent of what old school people like probably us used to call a demo.
Yeah.
So that exists, but Ryu is that character, and so they and we have a community, a pretty substantial community on Discord, and socials that are pretty familiar with the UNIOVERSE. So they've been following it, but this is the comics are kind of a way to open it up beyond the community and pull other people in that aren't necessarily as familiar with who these characters are. So,
it's funny you said the game demos. My mind immediately went to the PlayStation discs that you would get.
Oh yeah, I missed those days.
I completely forgot about those. But it was a lot of fun, right? I think you can still get demos now on some level, but that was how you find out about games, way before social media, stuff like that. I remember that was my first introduction to Lara Croft Tomb Raider, was playing that demo disc. Yeah. I'd never heard of this character before. Then I played the demo disc and I was like, oh, this is really cool, and so that just brought back a lot of memories.
Oh yeah, it was awesome because when I was a kid and I couldn't afford all the games, it was free, it was just the demo, right? And I would just save all the discs. I mean, I had them stacked up and then worthless now, right? But really cool concept. I miss so much of that stuff. But yeah, I subscribed. I think I can't even remember what the Xbox magazine was. But I that's what I got. I was the snobby Xbox guy. So you're the snobby PlayStation guy, right?
I want to say snobby. It's just that's just what we had. Yeah. So, but I will say this though. So as an adult that got back into video game, I went back to doing PlayStation because I was familiar with that. My brother, who's a big gamer, loved Xbox, and I wanted to play more games with him. So I was like, maybe I'll go get an Xbox instead of getting the newest version of PlayStation. I'll be honest, I hated it. It felt like it took a lot longer to update and to load and stuff like that. And my brother's always like, well, maybe you have too many games on there. I was like, I have 2 games. It should not be that bad.
Yeah, I'm not like that now. I at all. Actually, I'm an equal opportunist. I like them all for different reasons. But yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I kind of feel old now. You guys are talking about PlayStation magazine. I had the first issue of Nintendo Power.
Oh yeah, I had Nintendo Power.
Okay.
As well.
Oh yeah, the Power Glove, all Oh, the scope, the Nintendo scope for games and stuff like that. Yeah.
Of all people, my grandma subscribed to that.
Really?
She was the coolest grandma on the block because she loved Nintendo, Super Nintendo. She had all of it. The Genesis, Sega Saturn, and still she still plays seriously Donkey Kong Country.
That's awesome.
Yeah, same setup from back in the 80s up in her attic is still there, and she still plays it.
Oh, I love hearing that. That's so cool.
Yeah,
I hope I'm that cool when I'm a grandparent.
Same here. Yeah.
Oh wow. Um, that sparked something in my mind, but I completely forgot about it now. So I apologize.
No worries.
Yeah.
That's okay. So talking about, I mean, we've talked a little bit about Ryu and Krishna. I mean, what is when you're writing these characters, do you have to, kind of, is there a certain, mindset you go to or a certain place you go to, um, for, that character that you're, working on that one shot?
Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, the beauty of when I came in on the project was they had yeah, I came in so early that I really kind of got to help shape and mold the characters while they were being developed. So I guess I kind of like already had a sense of who they were before we started the actual writing process. Um, so in that sense, I felt somewhat familiar to them. But what was our process was taking it through, and so many people got their hands on approvals for, you know, the story team, which consisted of, various people, and then the Brent Friedman, the narrative director. Um, there was a lot of back and forth. We rewrote each comic honestly, probably it was an astronomical amount because the the world rules were changing so much. Like the art director would like introduce something. He was a great guy, by the way, but he would introduce like some new weapon that would interact differently, and then they said, "Oh, that would be cool if we changed that in the character's backstory," and then it just completely would change the narrative.
Right.
And yeah, so sometimes we got used to a character, and then I mean, honestly, Anil, I think, started as a male and she's now a female character, so we had to like switch that, and she's a mother and this kind of motherly figure, but she was not like that before. So yeah, it was a lot of back and forth. I don't know if I
Let's talk
really
it.
answered your question there,
No,
sorry,
no,
but
no, that's fine. Um, you're doing the writing. Let's talk a little bit about, your artists. How did you kind of get paired up with them? Have you worked with them before, or
yeah, so AJ, who does the cover art, he I've known him for some time. He's currently an artist for Blizzard, has been for quite some time, working on Hearthstone, Overwatch. Great artist, great guy. He met me way back at the Denver Comic Con first year. I had the Hex Publishers booth there, and he was looking for work. He wasn't working at Blizzard at that point in time, so we kind of hit it off, and I've hired him, here and there to do covers for various books, and we've just maintained a good friendship. And we were talking yesterday. He's finishing the sixth cover now, and helping me with another comic book project that I'm doing. So I've known him a while, and then Ben Matsuya. What in previous my previous experience in comics, I'm really picky because I'm an artist, and I've been an art director, and I know what I want, and it's been hard for me to find just somebody that I mesh with really well. And because I was in charge of the budget for these comics, it was like, okay, it would be really awesome to find a really talented guy that can do it all, and I didn't think it was possible, honestly. But Ben, I just stumbled across his work. He did these really cool one pagers of various movies that he liked, and I think it was Nerdist that published it.
Hmm.
But he like distilled an entire movie to one page, and one of them was Get Out, and it was like so brilliantly done. Not only was the art beautiful, but just like the guy knows sequential storytelling. He knows how to do it. It's not just that he's a talented artist that can put a cool piece of art on the page. He gets visual storytelling.
Hmm.
And then I started looking, and I was like, oh, I wonder how much his letterer, is, and the colorist. And I reached out, and he's like, oh yeah, it's all me. I do it all. Um,
Wow, that's awesome.
and yeah, and I just looked through his portfolio, and we really just got along. He's like one of the nicest guys I've ever met, and very collaborative, very just cool to work with. So yeah, we just that's what and now I've like booked him out all through the end of next year with various comic book projects that I have coming up, because I just enjoyed working with him so much.
It's awesome.
Yeah, pretty cool to meet. You come into a project and you don't know who you're going to meet or what's going to happen, and then now I'm like, wow, I'm really going to focus more on comics and work with Ben a lot more. So.
Well, and I feel like with those opportunities that you have with artists, like their art style can really bring up some really interesting storytelling aspects as a writer that you didn't think about before, because something in their art kind of inspires you to be like, oh, maybe, composition wise or whatnot, like we can do it this way because that really inspired me to do that. And so it's really cool to kind of hear the stories about, connecting with the artist and like how that spurs into like a long time relationship with those people to create really interesting, really cool comics like that.
Yeah, the like I said, I've worked with some great artists, and he just, like I said, he just gets it. He really understands what we're trying to do, in the script. And when we say, okay, like this is how we want to end this page, I mean, he understands why. It's not that we just have to. And then oftentimes he's elaborating on something and introducing a new thing that is like, wow, I didn't even, wouldn't even have thought of that. But it's because he has a real understanding of, like I said, sequential storytelling. It's that sense of like, what is the purpose of each panel, not just to look nice,
Right.
We were talking like a couple weeks ago, and he was like, art isn't even important to me. It's the story. That's what matters. And I'm like, I wish more artists were like you. So
right. And kind of switching gears a little bit, because this is something that is tied with the video game series. I have not been exposed to anything with the UNIOVERSE until, the last couple of days when we knew that you're coming on the show and everything. For those who want to get into the story, do they really need to know anything from the video game, or is there any kind of background information? I know at the end of every page, there's kind of like a background information on a couple of characters. And it already seems like there's some world building that's already been kind of created, behind the pages and all that. But if somebody wants to get into the story, do you think they need to know much about what's going on in the video game, or at least the world of that video game?
By the time all 6 comics have come out, our goal is to, try to make sure that if you're new to this, you get a sense of what the UNIOVERSE is. That was a big mission for us, was to make sure, yes, that the existing fans will appreciate it, but really this is to bring in people who aren't familiar. But through the website, the UNIOVERSE website, I think they have a story tab, and there is a backstory like PDF that they put out with a bunch of artwork by Stuart Jennett, who a phenomenal concept artist. And yeah, that really dives into the backstory. That's actually all that's been revealed to the community. That already exists. We call them the community, but the UNIOVERSE fans that follow it, that's all they know right now. And now we're churning out the comic books, and then by the time the actual anthology launches in August, whether or not you even play the video game, all of the lore will exist between those mediums.
Right.
So, yeah. But cool. Yeah, there is that. Anybody can access the website and check out the backstory for on the website for free. So
cool.
Yeah, no, it's been like I said, I've done a lot of writing projects. I've worked in video games, and this has been the most interesting experience for me, because I've never been at the ground level working on somebody else's property and learning it, helping build it, and then watching them bulldoze it and then build it back up, constantly. But yeah,
right.
But it's been fun.
Are there any of the characters that you kind of gravitated towards, or kind of were hesitant about if you were going to be able to write, their story, and then say, oh, I had the perfect story for them?
I wouldn't say I was hesitant. about anyone. I certainly have my favorites. I like them all. I think they're all unique and interesting. Anil, as far as the heroes, Anil is probably my favorite. She's issue 4, because she's an interesting character, but she also has a really important back history that ties into a greater plot that's revealed in issue 6 and in the anthology. But what I had the most fun with was it took a little work on my part, but I convinced them to let me and Angie, we developed the villain for the UNIOVERSE. So they hadn't had that in place yet, and we had a really I think unique idea that played with the existing lore and the technology that they developed, and it allowed us to create this really, like, the Darth Vader, I guess you could say, or the Thanos of this universe. Even though ours isn't really as messed up, but he's similar to Thanos in the sense that something happened to him, and he sees like a greater purpose by what his mission is. He's not trying to really inflict harm, but what he's going to do, he knows that it will, right? But he thinks that it's for the greater purpose and it needs to happen. Although it's not about snapping his finger and killing half the population. So, but we got that character's name is Silas. I can kind of tease some of the story elements, I suppose. In the UNIOVERSE backstory, when this technology is uncovered, there's the transpods, or what they're called. That's, you get inside of it and it shoots your consciousness across the galaxy. So Malcolm Orion is who we call the brave traveler. He's this human that's kind of a guinea pig. He steps into this thing not knowing what's going to happen, and he awakens by himself in this massive I guess you could say what he assumes is a spaceship, this space station, I should say. Anyhow, long story short, by him going through the transpod, he's reactivated all of this technology, and it's connected all of these worlds that have been seeded, something like 300,000 plus, maybe it was 500,000 years ago. And we don't know why it was shut down, but because he entered it, accessed it, he turned everything back on. And now that's the backstory. And now the comics pick up roughly 500 or so years later. Malcolm has changed the face of, the galaxy, because everything's connected now. And the merge, or the hub, which is where he arrived at, is the central point it's like the airport, or the DIA, or however you want to view that of this thing. And you have to go through this political system to make sure that you can join the merge, and blah 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 blah. And so our heroes are involved there. So what we decided to do when we introduced our character, our villain character Silas, without giving away too much, he is part of a hive mind species, and so they are connected through thought. They can be, on one planet here, on another planet over here, with zero, they're not going to be able to interact very, very quickly or very easily, or maybe ever at all. But through their hive mind, they're connected, just like we are in the internet. We're here. But when Malcolm Orion went through the transpod and reactivated the Meson Zero, which is the name of the tech, that emitted something that shut down Silas's entire hive mind. It destroyed it in an instant, and they lost all communication. And because their species was based on this kind of organic tech that they're born with, they lost contact with everybody. And now Silas is like, and this happened 500-ish years ago. He's on a mission to shut down the Maso, is the short versions for Meson Zero. And by doing that, he's basically going to reverse the whole process for everybody else that's become connected through it. And he's using the heroes. He's trying to use the heroes that we were developing in a way to help him do that. He's manipulating them. They have some ability that will help him accomplish that goal. So anyhow, long rambling there, but that was a lot of fun to create that character. I'm partial to villains and their motivations and stuff like that. So
Honestly, villains are a lot of fun. We were just talking about this with my kid, and he absolutely loves villains. And we're talking about, like, one of the reasons for that is that villains always tend to have the most interesting thing, whether it's the most interesting backstory, the most interesting weapons, the most interesting looks. Um, my kid, I'm going to talk about him for a little bit. Uh, he never watched Star Wars like really growing up. Like, he saw a couple of things, but when we went to Disney World, he saw Darth Maul for the very first time. He's never saw the movie. He never saw the cartoon show. First time he saw him was at Disney World Hollywood Studios. And up until that point, his favorite character in Star Wars was Darth Vader, but he literally, like, stopped in his tracks, like, watched him for, like, a good couple of minutes, and he's like, "That's my favorite now." Just because he had, an interesting look and the double, lightsaber and all that, but, like, villains just seem like they're really they're always distinct, right? Like, you don't really get a lot of villains that kind of overlap or seem, very similar, a lot of times, at least not as much as, like, the heroes and stuff like that, right? And so, they always seem like they have a lot more opportunities to kind of go in whatever different way you want to go with that character, that makes it really unique and stand out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most interesting villains are the ones that you can really sympathize with. Like you can, yeah, it's like, yeah, they're bad guys, right? But I
Mhm.
kind of get why they're bad guys. I get it.
Yeah, yeah,
Those are the most interesting to me.
yeah. Well, and speaking of looks, like, I'll be honest, like, Rayu, sorry, I keep forgetting how to pronounce it.
I honestly forget all the
Yeah.
time. So
um, I gotta be honest, like, if I was just looking at the character's, appearances, I would have thought that this was a villain just because of the way his, jawline is, and the fact that he has, like, no upper face at all. It's just a metal plate and everything. Like, just based on that alone, I would have just assumed it was a villain because it has a lot of resemblance with other kinds of villain. It almost has like that predator alien look
totally,
with
yeah,
the tentacles in the back of the head and stuff like that. And so to see this character be at least a anti-hero, we know we haven't gotten to the story so far just yet, but, like, it's definitely not a villain in this regard. Doesn't see himself as a villain. And so it's just really interesting to see that sort of distinctive look that it could have been a villain if you looked at the person before you even read the story.
yeah.
Um,
I totally see. I mean, when I was brought on to the project again, they had the artwork for him.
right.
When I saw it, I was like, that is awesome. But as he's written, he's actually the most like noble of the characters, which actually I
Right.
think is kind of cool. He's
Mhm.
but what they're playing with, what they're having fun with, as more of this stuff comes out, is just the diversity in the art styles for the aliens and the species, and they truly put a lot of thought into, like, let's not villainize something for looking scary.
Right.
Actually, they're in the game, we have like some astronomical amount of skins for each character.
Hmm.
There's like a rarity model. I don't know. I know there's like at least 20,000 Ryus, like variations of them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Dang.
it's pretty crazy. But yeah, he takes his faceplate off, and it's very like way more horrific than
Oh,
than
no
you've
kidding.
seen. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I can only
Um,
imagine. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's a like, it was really interesting just to kind of watch that story unfold. And I'm just like, man, he just, again, just look and love, like, especially that, like, I don't know what happened to him, but that jaw, like, it just looks very sinister.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
He
so it's just really interesting to
Yeah.
see that, but I love that, like, that was an intentional thing of, like, how they wanna disrupt people's thoughts on, how characters should look, based on their, based on their, assigned role in the story, right?
right. And I will say, I mean, I don't think any of them are. Uh, I think each of the characters are probably anti-heroes. There's not,
Mhm.
like I said, Ryu's more noble, in the sense that he's just adhering to his culture and what he's been brought up to be. Right. That's what's
Right.
most important to him. But if that involved like a darker task, he would do it.
Mhm.
But all of the characters are more anti-hero,
Yeah.
and that's something that was very important. Wyeth, the um, co-creator, he kept referring to this. This is what he wanted, was Altered Carbon meets Game of Thrones. That's the vibe that he sort of wanted. I think we went more like, a little bit of Blade Runner and Halo. There's a lot of things in there, right?
That space element in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But he wanted this gritty vibe that from the get-go.
I totally get the alter carbon thing with the different skins. Like when you were talking about how, they get this organic skin when they transfer their consciousness and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly from alter carbon.
Yeah. Very, very similar. Certainly inspired by that. Other than the fact that it is, there's interesting rules that we get into that and actually really it was done as a way. I mean, if you're thinking about it, it's a gameplay mechanic. I mean, it's all about, having new skins, experiencing different worlds. How do you do this? How do you have one character that you can, you can be a human, or you can be a six-legged, creature. We even went, they had some nutty ideas. So
I would think the lettering would play a huge role in that.
For the different
so that way if they take on a different appearance or look, you can have the lettering stay with them, so that way it distinguishes their character that way.
That's a good point. We and in the comics we didn't actually show, because again we're establishing, even though that's the rules, right? We're actually not showing them jumping into another skin other than their because they're the main heroes. But when you read the anthology plans for the games, you'll see a lot more of that. But so we have different versions of that. We have what an Ori, which is short for original skin, which is like a clone of your body. And then we have rental skins, and that's where it gets interesting. It's like, who's had this before? There's we call it ghost residue, where if your consciousness is in there, it's there's fragments of other consciousness could mess with you. And then if you jump, we call it jumping from transpod to transpod. This is where the book that's out really dives deep into this. And that's something called 0 hour. After you've jumped so much, your consciousness starts to degrade. You can only jump so long before you start to go crazy, or various other things. And so we explored a lot more of that stuff in the actual anthology as opposed to the comics.
Right. That makes sense.
So is there, I know this is, a 6-issue anthology introducing the game. Is there, depending on how this does, could there be possible plans for, more going forward?
Yeah, we've already had many conversations about that. It is a complete an introduction to these characters, this world, what the through line is for the plot and all of that, but it is certainly left open with the intention of exploring it more. So we've had those conversations. I mean, really it's just going to come down to if it resonates with people, if it's interesting. I hope so, because we have a lot of, we've mapped it out. We know what we would do with it. So there's some really cool stuff that nobody knows about, or that we're introducing in the 6th comic. That's a lot of fun. So fingers crossed.
When you're writing these stories, because so much of it's already been kind of established in the video game, stuff like that, do you have creative opportunities to kind of play around with the characters? I know, for example, a lot of writers like to write either themselves or someone they know into the story, not necessarily maybe as a character, but maybe a character trait or storyline or something like that. Do you find that those opportunities still exist, even though this is kind of already an established thing with the video game, or is it just a lot more difficult to do?
What, like I said, we developed the rules, right? So we know what the characters can do, what they can't do. We know the timeline and big events, things that are supposed to happen or have happened. So all of that was established and defined. But Angie and I got to build the plot, right? So everything that happens was we were in that sandbox together and we mapped it out. So even though you're working within the rules of something, we still had a lot of freedom. It was just a matter of convincing the people that gave us the thumbs up that it was worthwhile to explore. And that was the harder objective. But we really there really was a lot of freedom, and actually, even though in the moment a lot of the restrictions were kind of like annoying, I think it actually challenged us to tell a better story, because we had to find ways around it. Angie said this to me. She's like, what writers do, what we're doing is that we look at this as like, the rules are the foundation. We've laid the concrete, and what a writer is doing is looking for that one little crack, how they can get in there and destroy it and flip it on its head.
Mhm.
And that's because so many cool concepts were coming. We were pulling out, and we thought they would have been fantastic, and they're like, nope, not possible. We can't make sense of it. It doesn't work with the rules. We had a lot of that. So then it was a little bit of arm wrestling and trying to say, well, actually, if we approach it this way, we can break that rule. And good storytelling is I think, about breaking the rules. So, anyhow, yeah, we had a lot of fun with that, and that was more plot driven as far as like the characters themselves, and their personalities. Some more than others. Ryu is probably the one we couldn't tweak as much. He's very stoic. He's very the silent warrior type. But in issue 5, I think we had the most fun as far as characters playing with Vela Jenks, because he's the only hero that has like a little sidekick. So we got to play around with that, and his sidekick is very much, in my mind, when I was writing him, like Claptrap, if you're familiar with Claptrap from Borderlands. Just an annoying, funny sidekick of sorts. So yeah,
Kind of like my role in this show.
Oh, come on. We'll see. That's fun.
This is the first time I'm on the show. I have no idea what my role is. I'm that guy I'm that friend that wasn't invited but just showed up
and took over.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
The inmates are running the asylum.
Yeah, no, but it was a fun project. I learned a lot from it because I've never written like this. I do actually a lot of like tie-ins and adaptations for various things, but this was the most complicated, I guess you could say. But also,
so we're almost. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, you're good.
Go ahead, finish.
Just
no, go ahead and finish.
There were complications, but also there was just a lot of freedom, and the team was just great to work with. I mean, everybody was very collaborative and wanted to just tell a good story. The people behind the games and the visuals and all that, they just want the best that they can possibly deliver. So that was the mentality.
So as we kind of wrap up here, what's next for you and or your role with Hex Publishing?
I've got quite a few things. One of them, I don't know if I can say much about it, but I'm so excited and want to.
If you can't say anything about it, then please don't.
I have a new comic book series that's coming out this fall. We haven't announced it yet, so very, very, very excited by who I'm writing with for that one. Can't wait. It's in the horror genre, but so that will be announced, I believe, in July. So if you're a really great writer, so super stoked about that. I am doing not in the comic book space, but with Hex. A tie-in, a novel tie-in to Cell Dweller / Scandroid's new album. So if you're familiar with who Clayton of Cell Dweller is, he scores tons of movies and video games. He's currently scoring the new Borderlands movie, actually, that Eli Roth did. And he's done Transformers, Ninja Turtles. But he also has his own, just his own band and bands, I could say. He's like Trent Reznor. He's just a one-man band. But one of them is Scandroid, and that's this synthwave, very high concept, story heavy thing. Sounds very much like Blade Runner, I guess you could say. So he hired me to adapt and tell a story based on the new album that'll be out this fall. So that was exciting, and I got to work with Sean Eads on that, and he's a Shirley Jackson Award nominee. So we just finished that draft recently, and now we're getting into the merchandise and some cool stuff there. So that'll be out this fall. And then I'm publishing Alvaro Zainos Amero's new science fiction novel called Equimedian. He's a phenomenal writer, Hugo Award nominee. And then I have Bleeding Rainbows, which is a not safe for work gay poetry collection by Max Ian Gold, who's a multiple nominated poet. And that was the most unique, different, out of the comfort zone that I've ever published before. So I'm very interested and excited to see how it does. So there's a lot of stuff all over the place. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled.
Will do.
Sean, do you have another one last question for Josh?
Gosh, not on top of my head right now, which is strange because I was asking question after question. So of course, when I'm on the spot, I can't come up with anything. Yeah. No, but this is a really cool story. I really like this story. Like I can't say enough good things about it. I think it's a really cool storytelling aspect, and it's really good. So I'm really excited about this. This is neat.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
So, Josh, as we kind of close up, do you want to kind of give a final pitch for the series, for Hex Publishing, and where people can follow your stuff, be it on the internet or social media?
Sure. Yeah. So for the UNIOVERSE and Krisha, I wanted to share this. So this is Krisha. That's what we're calling the common edition. So as with the video game, you get there's a chance that you'll get a legendary edition. So we have these like kind of special edition versions that come with the print copies, but that'll be out June 6th. You can follow anything for the UNIOVERSE at unioverse.com, Hex Publishers at hexpublishers.com, not Hex Publishing. Biggest mistake in my life. But yeah, and then the typical socials, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So yeah.
All right. Well, we'll definitely include this in the write-up we do about the show and about the universe and all that stuff. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, Sean, for sitting in tonight. It was great to finally get a chance to interact with you other than typing.
Yeah. It's nice to have a personality behind the text messages, right?
It helps.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But well,
I just want to say thanks for having me. It was awesome meeting you. Well, too. Appreciate it.
And well, whenever you have something else that you want to talk about, you're more than welcome back, and we'll talk about that and everything else. Any project that you have coming up, and we enjoyed having you. And as Matt likes to say, much better than I do, be nice to each other. Simple Comic Shop. Go find these books there, and if they can't get them, have them order them, and do something nice for somebody else. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.